Hello, everyone. Just a reminder that you're still muted. Perfect.
So you really need a paper version.
We are now on.
Yes.
Let me know when you're ready, Tara. Okay, that's fine. Okay, Lisa, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm all set.
All right, so it is Wednesday, August 20th. It is 6:36 p.m. and I'm calling this Laws and Rules Committee meeting to order. In attendance, we have myself, Chairwoman Alderwoman Hirsch. I'm going around the table. We have Alderman Michael Tierney, who is sitting in for Alderman Bob Dennison, who is also on Zoom. We have Alderwoman Terrell Mickens, Alderman Rennie Scott Childress, Alderwoman Sarah Tosti, Corporation Counsel Barbara Graves Poller, and President Schott. We have a lot of people here tonight, and thank you for coming out, but I just want to remind everyone that you need to remain silent, that we cannot have any interruptions, any opinions. There are no back and forth with the committee and the audience here tonight, the public. Usually, so the first thing on our agenda is the rental vacancy study, which will be presented by our Department of Head of Housing Initiative, Bartek Starodash. After he presents, we will be presenting questions to him. And I'd like to just change the order of things a little for tonight. How the committee will ask these questions. We'll go around the table instead of raising hands, so that it's just easier for me to track as I take notes as well. And I also ask that anyone on the committee please not have any crosstalk. It makes it very difficult for people to hear on YouTube. So with that, I'd like to invite Bartek Starodash to the table. Thank you.
All right, so this survey was, good evening, everyone. So this survey was published last week. For tonight, my goal is to review some of the highlights. And so I'll thank you for your patience as I go through the survey genesis as well as the results. So the first thing I want to say is that the last rental vacancy survey that was completed was obviously in 2022, and a lot has happened in the intervening 3 years. I'm going to go through some of the statutory changes. So first, the law itself changed, right? And so this law change was in part to facilitate the collection of data. And so as a result, some of the questions that were asked, also some of the requests that were made from the property owners was because of we were newly empowered by state law. Second, there was a successful defense of the city's 2022 emergency declaration. And there, the court held that parties challenging housing emergency declarations bear the burden of establishing that a municipal, quote, vacancy rate finding fails to rest on a reasonably reliable and relevant measure of the municipality's actual vacancy rate for the relevant class of housing accommodations. Now, separate from some of these statutory changes and some of the legal back and forth, a lot has happened on the city side with some of our proactive housing initiatives. And so first and foremost, we passed the citywide rezoning initiative to make it easier to build housing throughout the entire city. We passed good cause eviction, which applies to a fair percentage of the city's renters. We passed strict short-term rental regulations, which limited the amount of short-term rentals in the city to 1% of our housing stock. And again, before these changes, and I should say we have 96%, over 96% compliance rate with these changes. Before these short-term rental regulations, I would get calls all the time from investors looking to buy properties for short-term rentals. Those calls have virtually ceased. We are better using our own properties. Many of the city-owned properties that were sitting and languishing have now moved on to, let's call them better lives, better housing lives, right? Either for use for mixed income or affordable housing. And there's more to come, right? The city has started eminent domain proceedings against former urban renewal properties downtown. And we're also pursuing a public mixed income development model to also encourage more mixed income housing development. So these are all the things that there's a lot has happened. So obviously the housing market, there's been a lot on the policy side. So it's good to acknowledge that in addition to any market changes that have happened in Kingston. I thought it'd be good to also, and the survey report also does this, is to contextualize our vacancy rates with what we know from higher levels. So we can start with the city of Kingston. In 2019, CRG or CGR, I think it might be CGR, found that a vacancy rate of 5.8%. The 2022 study found a 1.57% vacancy rate. There was a county study in 2023 that found a 3.4% vacancy rate. The disadvantage with the county number is that the sample size, because it's county study, the sample size in the city of Kingston was quite small, I think around 88 units. But I presented this number here anyway. New York City, 2021, the vacancy rate was 4.5%. In 2023, however, that vacancy rate shot down to 1.4%, very much a historic low. New York State, we can see that the vacancy rate seemed to bottom out in 2022 when the last vacancy study happened at 4.3%, and the latest metric has it rising to 5.5%. Let's look at national numbers as well. Also bottomed out in 2022 at 5.6%, has since risen to 7.1%. Okay, so some key aspects of the 2025 methodology, and also some of the changes that have happened since 2022. So in terms of rental vacancy rate and how we're defining that, that has not changed. Still defined as the percentage of apartments that are vacant, habitable, and available for rent out of the total number of apartments in the class being studied. Number two, this is a change, is that in contrast to the previous two studies, we looked at other building categories. And for me, speaking as the housing director, I think it's good to have as much information about on the ground conditions as possible. And so I thought it would be interesting to look at non-ETPA, non-rent stabilized buildings. as well. And, if you look at other vacancy studies like in New York City, they study some of these larger aspects of a housing market that really informs policymaking. And so taking advantage of the study to get additional information. And so here are the categories we have the ETPA sample. So these are rent stabilized buildings that were part of the city's sample. We have ETPA buildings that were not part of our sample, but we received results for them anyway. There are rent stabilized buildings, and we call dubious status. And so these are rent stabilized buildings, but they have some kind of a pending administrative determination with DHCR. And so there's some uncertainty about their status. We have regulated buildings. And so these are outside of the rent stabilized buildings. These are buildings that are typically affordable or senior housing. They receive some kind of a state or federal subsidy to operate. And then we also just have our plain market rate buildings that don't have any federal or state subsidy tied to them. So number 3, also new this study is a sampling approach. And so the goal with the sampling approach is to better focus the study on a subset of the buildings to ensure that we could get to the extent possible, 100% response rate from that sample. And rather than study all of the rent stabilized buildings. And so the way this worked was that all buildings with 15 or more units were included in the sample. And then for all other buildings, a random sample of 25 addresses were selected. And so in total, 546 out of 681 units were sampled, which is approximately 80% of ETPA units. Number 4, also new this year was a rental roll request, and this was part of the changes in state law that I mentioned earlier, which empowered the city to make this request. So here we requested the previous 12 months of rent rolls from each property, showing unit identifiers, name of that unit, and the monthly cost of that unit for May 2024 through April 2025. So the survey process, the survey request letter was sent on May 1st, requesting responses by May 15th. The survey asked for a total number of units, occupied units, unoccupied units, and units unavailable to rent, typically because they're under renovation. And then the information requested was as of the date of March 27th. And so the survey was sent out May 1st, but we're asking for information as of March 27th. In terms of the response rates, I'm going to start from the bottom here. So regulated buildings, this is the affordable buildings, 100% of response rates. Market rate buildings, 75% response rate. The top building, this says regulated buildings, but what I mean by that is the ETPA sample. So I received 100% of responses from the sample, meaning the 80% of ETPA units that I had in the earlier slide. Now, with the rent roll request, I should say that respondents were generally compliant with that request as well, especially after some follow-up or clarification that was given. There are some exceptions that we can discuss later. Okay, so I'm going to go through my results here. Okay, so for on the left, you'll see ETPA buildings that were part of the sample. And so there were, as I mentioned, there are 35 properties included in the study group. In total, that means that there are 625 units. And 44 units were reported vacant. 9 were reported unoccupied but not available to rent. And I'm going to exit full screen because it's not showing my bottom here. Let's see if this works.
Can you explain unoccupied but not available to rent?
Yeah, so they're not part of the net, they're not added to the net vacancy rate. For instance, a unit is unoccupied, but it's not actually being marketed, or it's not actually available to rent. Because, for example, it's being rehabbed, or it doesn't have its COO. It's not actually a rentable unit.
And do they need to, the property owners need to explain why it's unoccupied but not available to rent? So if it's rehab or for whatever reason, is that part of it?
Yeah, so I think for all these 9 units, I did receive an explanation.
Okay.
But this number 9 is that they're not contributing to the net vacancy. They're not part of that calculation.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you clarify that? They were removed entirely from the calculation or they were counted as not vacant?
Entirely. Yes. They're not part of the net vacancy level.
Also, Laura, since there's a lull.
Yep.
So I don't forget, would you be willing to share this slide with the rest of the common council, with the full common council? Thank you.
Here the report, aren't they?
But I wasn't sure if it was, never mind.
The slides. Yeah, the slides.
Yeah, I want the slides. So it's easy to read. I'm not sure.
No. Okay, so you can see here on the left, based on those calculations, we go to a 7.04% net vacancy rate. And that calculation is vacant units available to rent versus total reported units. Now, for the ETPA properties that were not sampled, so in some cases, properties outside of my sample nonetheless sent results. And so I did not include those within the 7% sample, but I am reporting those nonetheless. I'm not ignoring those responses. That was the case for 7 properties, representing 63 units. They had 10 vacancies and 3 units unavailable to rent. That equates to a 15.87% vacancy rate. Yeah.
Do you have the addresses of those units that, okay, and so they could be made available as well?
Yeah, and in fact, they are part of the, they are listed publicly listed in the survey in the appendix. Now, I will say that the vacancy rate did vary by building size as well. And so for ETPA properties with 6 to 14 units, the net vacancy rate was almost 8%. For ETPA properties between 15 to 22 units was 14.3%. And then also ETPA properties over 22 units, however, had a much lower vacancy rate at 3.73%. And so that represents the 4 largest properties, obviously, within ETPA. Looking at the results from the other property categories, let's start with the market rate units. So there were 8 properties included here with 192 units reporting 4 vacancies, a vacancy rate of just over 2%. For the regulated buildings, again, those are the buildings that typically have some kind of an income restriction. There were 8 properties included in the study group, representing 759 units, reporting a vacancy rate of 2.37%. Now, for the dubious category, again, these are the buildings that are still part of EDPA, but have some kind of a pending determination with DHCR, reporting a vacancy rate of 4%. And I should mention that even if you know, for the purposes of the study, this dubious category was separated out from the EDPA buildings. Now, even if these were added in, however, it does not change the fact that the vacancy rate is still over the 5% threshold. All right, so let's look back at some comparisons. So 2019, again, we had a 5.8% vacancy rate. That's the vacancy rate if there's a no vacancy presumption applied for the unresponsive units. The 2022 rate was 1.57%, and taking the results at face value for 2025, that results in a vacancy rate of 7%. And so, you know, it's the 2022 number was in some ways not surprising at all, right? It was very much the post-COVID housing market here in the city of Kingston. The 2025 net vacancy rate is really a more of a return, right, to what we saw in 2019. So just some conclusions. I just mentioned that the 7% rate is in some ways a return to what we saw in 2018. Now, while the overall net vacancy rate for the sampled EDPA buildings exceeds the emergency threshold of 5%, it is notable that the vacancy rates do vary by building size, and that's especially true with buildings with more than 22 units, which recorded a net vacancy rate below the emergency threshold. And we can discuss why that might be. In addition, the net vacancy rates for the other rental categories are significantly lower than those found for the EDPA covered properties. Now, explaining this isn't the focus of the study, but there's some, we can surmise, right, certain things that may be true. So number one, regulated housing units, they typically experience greater demand by default because of the rental subsidies involved that lower tenant costs, right? So living in one of these buildings is quite attractive, especially in the situation where we know, right, that the city's renters are housing cost burdened and paying a significant portion of their take-home pay, giving that to housing, right? And then the market rate units, on the other hand, in the sample, they tend to be newer and they offer greater and more modern amenities. And so they may therefore be more attractive to incoming tenants compared to some of the older buildings that are part of our EDPA building stock. So to sum up, the survey finds that the net vacancy rate for EDPA buildings exceeds the threshold required to declare a municipality-wide housing emergency, with the exception of buildings containing more than 22 units. Those are some of the main points from the study. Wraps up my presentation.
Okay. So, I'll start. My last. Do you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So what verification did you use to determine if vacant units were listed?
So that was not part of the study. So I did, and that is something that the common council can review as a follow-up as part of its legislative findings. The verification that I did on my side is obviously compare the vacancies reported against the rent roll that was submitted.
Okay.
Mike,
Could you,
before you go on, can you ask that question again, just to,
I said, what verification did you use to determine if the units were listed, like on
Yeah.
Zillow or Trulia or all that other things? Were there any abnormal responses to the study?
There was. There were. Can you define abnormal, like other than?
Out of the, anything that stood out particularly?
Yeah, there's really only one property that stood out. And that was 7983 Green, and this is noted in the study. Where the property owner did not provide upon request the full 12-month rental.
And that's a single room occupancy building, right?
It's a mixed building. There's various types of units in that property.
Okay. And how was the sample determined of which units got canvas?
Yeah, so the buildings with 15 or more units were automatically included in the study. And then the rest of the sample size, the 25 addresses, was randomly selected from the total list of buildings.
How were they randomly selected?
Random general.
So you said the larger buildings since the study concluded, it's been determined that Stony Run is indeed a stabilized building. It seems a little strange to not go back and canvass them.
Yeah. So they are canvassed and reported in the dubious category.
Okay.
Yeah. So they are contributing to the 4% vacancy rate that was reported today.
Okay. And now unavailable, you defined as without a C of O, but
Not necessarily. It could be that there's no C of O, or it could be that the previous tenant just left and the property owner was painting the property as of March 27th, so it's not actually available. So it could be there's no C of O, but not.
yeah, because it could be there's no sync.
Yeah.
Wouldn't remove the C of O. So on May 14th, the city held a public hearing for landlords and property owners. What information was shared in the public hearing?
Yeah, so it wasn't a public hearing. It was a kind of an informational session. And so the point there was to ensure that any property owner that received the survey that was confused by a question, wanted help answering, determining, what a question meant, that they could get clarity from me, that there's no confusion in the results.
Okay.
I'm
And
just gonna proceed. Can you take your screen off so that we can see what the other people think?
so what information was provided?
There was no vacancy information reported
Okay.
in that survey.
And was that well attended?
I think memory serves me right, there were 4 property.
Was there a recording of that meeting?
There is a recording.
Okay. Was there a corresponding meeting for ETPA tenants about their role in the process?
No. The purpose of the survey was to gather information from property owners.
So what role, if any, did tenants play in this process? Did you ask tenants to verify the status of the?
That's not
The
part of
units?
the survey process.
Okay. And to your knowledge, how many of these vacant units have been filled since the conclusion of the survey?
There's been the survey only asked for the as of March 27th.
Okay. And did you inquire on the median rent of the vacant units?
That is all included in the rental pattern. And I can share that.
Advertising is, or what the last tenant was paying?
The rental information includes the rent for each unit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you did,
Generally.
you mentioned earlier, you referenced the short-term rental regulations that we've since passed,
Mhm.
since the declaration of the emergency. How many ETPA buildings have been converted to short-term rentals since 2022?
There are no short-term rentals in any. What about 58 Fair? 58 Fair is vacant.
Okay. Um. Okay, that's all my questions for now.
So I just have a couple of questions at this point. So what is the correlation between the population of the city of Kingston, the adult population of the city of Kingston, and vacancies? So for instance, in 2020, we had 24,069 people, according to the census. That has declined to 23,748 in 2024. So I'm wondering if there's, because there were less people, what impact would that have?
Well,
on
I
vacancy
mean,
rate?
I'm hesitant to draw conclusions from just those two numbers alone. Especially the last number, it's an estimate, right? But let's say that that's right. Our population has actually declined. It could just be that our household size is also declining at an even faster rate, and so you have multifamily homes. You have the same number of units, but they're being occupied by fewer people, essentially. Right, so. But sure, if our population is truly declining, then that would obviously lead to less the demand and greater vacancy.
And in terms of the actual rent rolls that you were able to gather from the landlords, how do you verify that those rent rolls are correct? Is there any way to link them up with the taxes paid by the landlords? So are we just taking their word that these are the rent rolls, or?
There's no. Yeah, I mean, we're assuming that the rentals they're submitting are the actual rentals, yes. I mean, there's,
What tax information are you asking?
Well, to the extent that you make a profit on a building, you would have to, in terms of rental income, as a landlord, you have to report those that income, and that will be reflected in your tax return.
Oh, we can talk about it later too, but rental income wouldn't necessarily be reflected on the tax return. There are other factors too, so.
Oh, I understand that. But generally speaking, it's a cost.
there is nothing. Right, apart from that one property I mentioned earlier that did not submit a rent roll despite some multiple requests. I've taken the rent rolls at face value, right? And I can share them with you and you can also review them. But there was nothing in there that would make me say, oh, this is obviously made up, right? From my expertise.
And that's it for me. Okay.
Can you tell us more about why you think that the current sampling method is superior to the one from 2022?
Well, the 2022 method did not have a sampling method. The sampling method was introduced with this study. I think with the sampling method, I can better focus my outreach efforts on a smaller but still representative sample of buildings.
My understanding of the previous method though was that you got in contact basically with every property owner.
That's right.
So-
All buildings that would presume to be eligible for rent stabilization, correct?
And so then how confident are you that if you followed that earlier method, you would come up with the same numbers this time?
I'm fairly confident that this was a representative sample. I think you saw in one of my slides the ETPA sample was about 7%, but then there were also 6 buildings that nonetheless submitted responses, and their vacancy rate was about 15%. Now, those owners, because they had vacancies, I presume were more motivated to submit their responses to the city, right? Hoping that that would be part of the net vacancy rate. Now, I'm not hiding those results; they're still presented in the city. I mean, in the sample. But if those 6 that submitted surveys is balanced against all of the other properties that were not part of the sample and didn't submit a survey, my guess is that that vacancy rate would come down closer to 7% vacancy rate. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm confident that this was a representative sample and that it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And then what is the likelihood, in your opinion, that landlords kept apartments empty to increase the vacancy rate?
I don't see that in the rent rolls that were submitted.
So the rent rolls are the crucial thing for you because it gives you longitudinal
Right. Yeah.
data, not just the point of
Mhm.
survey
I
data.
mean, there were some, sure, there were some vacancies that lasted a couple of months. In some cases. But you also have to remember that these tend to be older buildings, in some cases with strange configurations. And so sometimes these are units that are harder to rent compared to other units. And so it's possible, right, in a market where there's slightly lower housing demand, that these units aren't immediately rented. Yeah. So again, this is something that the council can review the rent rolls and make legislative findings around. But from my position, there's not a pattern of abnormal vacancies or apartments that were being warehoused from what I.
Okay. How can you explain, you said a little bit about the differences between the properties with a smaller number of units versus larger units. Do you have a sense of why that would be?
Yes, I think the larger buildings tend to be professionally managed. And so they're able to better market the units and just more quickly rent them. Right? And they're also more known, right? You're looking for a place to live. My mind might go to some of these larger units complexes that are known right within the city as being a place.
Is it possible to maintain ETP regulations for buildings containing more than 22 units? In other words, is the law, the state law, does it require all ETPA eligible units to be covered or none?
I mean, that the council, my understanding, the council could change the class of housing accommodations that's covered by a housing emergency declaration.
So state law has some flexibility there.
That's right.
Okay.
And I should say other municipalities have done that.
Okay, well, that's really good to know. And so you answered that question. Do you have any idea, this is a little ancillary, but do you have any idea about what the corresponding changes in rents has been? Because you noted that in 2019, there was 5+% vacancy, 2022, 1+%, and now 7+%. Has there been any corresponding change in the rent, the average rents that we see, or the median rents?
Yeah, I mean, I think the rent, I think some of the rent data has to, I think, catch up to the vacancy rate in some respects. But the survey discusses the fact that we are still very much in an affordability crisis when it comes to the rents and home prices, which are really only continue to increase. And I mean, you can see why with the vacancy rates reported for the market rate and the affordable buildings. There's still a lot of rental demand out there. And and a lot of tenants seeking those units. So, even though the vacancy rate for the rent regulated building stock is high, the overall the housing market, the rental market is still very competitive. And it should also be noted that the percentage of rental units that the rent regulated building, rent stabilized buildings represent quite small. It's only about 20% of our rental buildings or rental units, right? Putting aside the owner occupied buildings. So it's a really small percentage of our total building stock. So that's also just because these buildings are going one way, they might not be enough to influence the overall picture of some of the housing statistics that you're saying.
That's all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, some of my questions have already been asked. Again, I have a question about who determines whether an apartment is available for rent or not. I mean, in some cases, might there be an apartment that's sort of under renovation, but it's been under renovation for 6 months, 9 months. It's not being put back on the market because the renovation is still going on. Is there any way to sort of take a look at that situation?
Sure, I mean, in that case, we can look at the building permit records and see if there's a record. But keep in mind that a unit that's under renovation is not available to rent, and therefore it's not part of.
It's not part of the study.
Yep.
At all. So it doesn't count as either vacant or not vacant. Okay. I have a question on page 10 of the vacancy study.
Mhm.
At the bottom of the page, it says, it's talking about the dubious buildings. It says, unlike the ETPA category, they may not be statistically representative of the broader population of units in their respective categories, and were sent different survey requests than those sent to the ETPA buildings. So what kind of surveys did those buildings receive?
Yes, so this is also the same survey instrument that was sent to the regulated buildings and the market rate buildings. And so that survey is included in the appendix, but it's just a shorter version of the same survey that the ETPA buildings received.
And by shorter, what is excluded from that survey?
Like some of it asks for less information, like I'm not asking for rent rolls. I'm not asking for, I don't think the survey, I can look, the survey doesn't ask like if you have a Section 8 voucher holder in your building. So it's just, there's less details around it. And really my motivation to that was that I really want more information about what's happening in the city from what's, the market rate buildings and also the affordable buildings. And so, I want some survey, but I also want a response. And so I just slimmed the survey down to facilitate that.
And would it be possible to go back to those buildings with a full survey if the council were to determine that that might be a good option?
I don't think most market rate buildings, I mean, they have no statutory obligation to provide me with like their rent rolls.
Right, but the dubious ones might, if they're also ETPA.
The dubious ones. Right. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and then there's a footnote that says when putting all responses together from all building categories, the total net vacancy rate is 4.55%. But due to the reasons presented here, the survey presents results for each building category.
Right.
So so can you explain the total net vacancy rate is 4.55%?
Yeah, so that's if you like, here's the whole thing, all the survey responses received. So all the vacancies are reported, all the units that were reported. If you just do that kind of raw figure, then you get that 4.55%. But again, the survey really focuses on, I did that as an exercise, but the survey really focuses on each category. And so, whereas I think it's interesting to have the market rate numbers and also the regulated building numbers, there was not really a strong methodology to choosing those buildings. And right, in terms of which affordable buildings or which market rate buildings to include in the study. I'm not making any claims that that sample is representative of all the market rate buildings in the city. I think the city could build upon, right, this survey and expand some of the questions being asked to some of these other building categories, but I can't confidently say that those categories represent, right, those kind of areas of our building stock. So that's the intent. The story behind the footnote.
We use the word snapshot
Yeah.
for those, whereas for the sample buildings, it is a sample with some
Right, it's like,
validity.
right, I mean, it's broadly representative of the ETPA category. Whereas I'm not making any claims that there's the market rate, there's no like statistical calculations here about, oh, here are the total number of market rate units in the building, in the city, excuse me. And here's the percentage of those I surveyed. That's not part of the report. It's more of a, information snapshot.
Okay, I guess those are my
Mhm.
primary questions, but I may have more later, but that's it for now.
Most of my main questions were answered, but I have a follow-up to one of Bernie's questions, about the apartments being warehouse, because that is something that I have heard from constituents
Yeah.
who live in some of the ETPA buildings. And you mentioned you didn't notice anything, but what would the red flags be for you to notice? Something like,
If there's a prolonged vacancy, like, over 3 months, it might make me wonder why that would be. Like, why-
and you didn't see anything that was,
there were some vacancies over 3 months. And in some cases, I did have a conversation, which is part of the record, with that owner if there was an explanation. And, the council could also, do the same thing, look at the rent rolls. There's a vacancy that is prolonged in some way, right, or suspicious. The council could also ask the same set of questions to the building owners to explain the vacancy.
and I'm sure we will.
Yeah, let me, like, one example is for, there was I forget how many months that unit was vacant. But it was more than 1 month, right? And the building owner explained that this is actually a basement unit. And, it has a very odd configuration. There's not a lot of light. So it's not easy to rent out.
And the other, I guess, question I have, which is more of, I guess, starting the legislative finding process, is as the housing director, what you came in 2022?
Yep.
Do you get, because we all get calls and hear from the public about the issues. Do you, as housing director, get calls directly from people who live in the city of Kingston with issues of not being able to find? Have you noticed from your office a difference between the last 3 years? Because for me, hearing from constituents, I don't notice a difference. You can think about it.
I
and
don't
let
think,
me
I mean,
know.
I always receive calls, but I don't think it's, I don't know if I can, from the phone calls that reach me, I don't think I can infer a strong pattern. The only one that I can infer is the short-term rental one, which is that makes sense, that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Bartek. So my first question is, do you have any data that compares the number of 2, 3, and 4 units with 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms in the under 22 unit category versus the above 22 unit category?
In terms of the bedroom size?
Yes.
No.
Okay. So, you compared this study vacancy rate with the 2019 survey vacancy rate. In the 2019 study, were the vacant units reported out available to rent or reported unoccupied but not available to rent?
Yes, it's the same calculation. Used in the 2019, 2022, and 2025 study.
Okay.
But there is a difference in terms of the as of date. Because in that study, the date at which the vacancy was reported was determined by the property owner. Whereas here, there is a control date.
And then, I'm sorry. So if I remember correctly, the 2019 survey actually had a higher vacancy rate for the larger buildings.
I don't recall the vacancy rate for larger buildings,
Okay.
but so much.
That one said that the larger buildings, the vacancy data was more difficult to do and much harder to verify.
Right. And I questioned them actually on the record when the consultant came and they said that it was impossible to go out and knock, so, and verify results. So you, in your opening presentation and in the report, you mentioned that we have had a lot of changes in the city, a lot of policy on the policy side and market changes. So, do we have a total absorption rate from the time of the 2022 study to now? So like the total number of units that might have been come on the market that are new and
I don't have that figure off the top of my head, but these are numbers that I recently gave to Carol. So I have all the information. I have the information of the number of units that came online, but not off the top of my head. And I think the largest wave of buildings, the real change, right, will come shortly with the opening of Golden Hill. And then not too long thereafter, next year with the opening of the Barrel Factory, which is the city's largest market rate. It's been constant development since the 80s. So those units are coming. I would have to look.
okay, so I'm asking for an exact number from between 2022's survey and now survey.
I can send you the email that you sent.
And can you send it to the rest of the committee members?
The whole council, yes, yeah.
So that would include the total rate at which rentable areas leased up over a period of time in a given market. It accounts for new construction, demolition, and the changes in vacancy. So that would be the number.
Then the information I have is the number of units that opened. I don't have the other two numbers that you mentioned.
Okay.
Demolition, what was it? Demolition was it?
Changes in vacancy. An overall snapshot of what's come on, what's been taken off. So it's an overall number. Okay, so how will we be provided the rent rolls?
Well, you tell me how you prefer them. I can give them in one big PDF file, excuse me, or a pile, or a physical pile. Or I can tell me how you'd like to work, and I will prepare them accordingly.
PDF, fine. PDFs sound great.
Yeah, that would work.
Go with that.
All right, and then will we also be able to get the actual survey, copy of the survey, PDF as well?
Yep.
Okay.
And a copy maybe of also the shorter one that was sent to, so the full survey and the shorter one.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when do you expect that we would have this?
Probably tomorrow.
Okay. So we still have to have, a public hearing, and then I'm sure that we will have more questions and request possibly more data and information. So yes,
I
Michael.
actually still have.
Oh, okay. All right. Sure.
Go around again.
Go ahead.
So could you define what vacancy means? Does that mean nobody's moved in? Does that mean the lease hasn't been signed yet? What does that mean?
The unit is vacant. So it's not currently being occupied.
So does that mean that somebody could have signed a lease but not moved in yet?
If it's under a lease, then that wouldn't be considered vacant. Yeah.
Your security deposit,
That's leased, not living. It's
that's,
different.
it's different. I mean, vacancy or not. So was that covered in the informational session, defining what a vacancy actually means?
I don't think we've discussed what a vacancy is.
Okay. Were there other city departments that assisted in this survey?
The survey was completed exclusively by my department, with the assistance of Corporation Counsel.
Okay, so how was, other than the rent roll, how was a vacancy verified? So, was it was not brought to the attention of, the building department when they do their annual inspections of all the rentals to check if there was somebody living there?
No.
Okay. On average, citywide, ETPA or no, how long does a vacant apartment stay on the market before it's leased?
That's not information that I have.
Okay. How did you arrive at that 22 or more threshold? Why wasn't it 23? Why wasn't it 21?
If you break up, I'm looking at the complete list of buildings by size.
Yep.
And then if you just break up the buildings into what you could call small rent stabilized buildings, medium-sized rent stabilized buildings, and then larger rent stabilized buildings. If you do that, you break up that data set that way, then for the larger ones, there's 4, and that's how you arrive at there.
But the number 22, how did you get to the number 22?
There's different ways you can break up the data set and calculate for a vacancy rate. That's how I did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it
no-
wasn't like, it's not like 1/3 of our ETP A buildings or our units are in buildings with 22 or more units?
I think,
And it's not 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 in terms of it's broken down to the 3.
I mean,
You did 5, you did 6 to 14, you did
all right,
15 to 21,
yeah,
22 or more. That's not 1/3, 1/3.
it might, no, yeah, it might actually end up being 1/3, 1/3, I can look, but that's not how I broke it.
Okay. So if the housing emergency ended,
Mhm.
would that lead to more or fewer of our constituents becoming housing insecure?
I'm not going to speculate what would happen. And these tenants would still have good cause eviction, right? So they would have this new layer of protections that the city didn't have in 2022. But I can't.
So what's the,
speculate? But I can't.
what is the allowable rental increase under good cause eviction?
So it's 5% plus the CPI. Currently.
So that's around 8%. Okay, that's all my questions for now.
Anyone else?
What I do, sorry, okay, I just lost it. So I'm gonna ask a question, they kind of explain why I'm asking the question, which I guess is also kind of a question. So the date of, as of March 27th, is there a reason behind picking that date? The reason why I'm asking is, I don't know, and others might know better, if there are times that are historically, there are more vacancies or there are less, and if that's true, first of all, I'm not sure if it is. And if that was part of the determination on this date, or was it just, I have to do this date, the survey in this time frame,
Yeah.
and this makes sense because it was what, a month and a half before?
Yeah.
Before you answer, can I refer the council to one document, Bartek's sworn statement that was submitted as part of the Court of Appeals. not Court of Appeals, but at the trial court level where you're actually building the record, where I put in two sworn statements, one of which actually talks about seasonal fluctuations. And sensitive to the fact that he is already opined on the issue of seasonal fluctuations that factored in to the determination of the as of.
Would you be able to share that with all of us?
You all have it, but yes, absolutely. It's part of the public record.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there's actually a footnote that links to some of the body of research around seasonal fluctuations within 2025 studies.
I have another question. So, again, you were comparing New York City, Kingston, the state. New York City's study takes into account all housing.
Yes,
And
it's a
then,
great study.
right, based on the census data. So if you were to venture a guess
Mhm.
about all of Kingston, using that same methodology, would we have a housing emergency?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I hesitate, right? I hesitate. I mean, the data show, you know, the study discusses in great length some of the challenges that we continue to face as a community with respect to our housing. And the affordable and the market rate numbers, do speak for themselves, but again, I can't claim that they're some way representative of the city as a whole.
So the housing task force had a presentation, and it included, I believe, 2023 census data for the vacancy rate in Kingston. And what was that?
I don't recall what that was.
2 or 3%. That is located on your website, the housing initiatives or Engage Kingston. Thank you.
So, I was not here at the time. But what was the impetus for requiring a survey 3 years later? Why 3 years? Or why a look back?
I mean, this was discussed back in 2022. I mean, I guess from my perspective, right, this is just me speaking. I think it's a good idea to understand what's happening in the city. And so I think the more data information that we have is a good thing. And we should study. I think it's good for a city to study its own housing stock, right? Rather than rely on the county's survey and its sample of 88 units, right? So, yeah, I mean, in the same way that I used the 2022 study and that vacancy rate finding to inform a whole host of policymaking, right? And I could feel confident when I said the 1.57% vacancy rate, because that's a study that was done by the city, right? And defended at the Court of Appeals, right? And so in the same way, yeah, studying our housing stock is a good thing. That's just my personal.
One note just about the conversation, I'm looking at Rennie because I remember we were sitting on the side when the conversation happened about how frequently the vacancy study was performed in New York City, which is at the university. A different statutory provision, but 3 years is kind of normative. And if the city does not survey its own property owners, just as they did in response to our study in 2022, they will simply create their own data about the housing accommodation. So having a fair and neutral and accurate account pulled together by the city is something that you all need to ascertain housing conditions under the statute. Otherwise, it will be left to the property owners to do themselves.
But I was under the impression that it was not a requirement.
That's not really correct. If you look at 8623B, it makes very clear that the emergency must end if the vacancy rate for the defined class exceeds 5%. So without the city, in some vacancy study, you will have litigation by property owners every time.
Nice.
Because they would do, yeah, they would do it. And this gives us,
And access.
Control.
yeah. And not being behind the ball, yeah. Thank you, Bartek.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
I have a question, but it's not for Bartek. It's a general question about what are the next steps?
I was gonna propose something, if that's okay.
Uh-huh.
1 second, please. Done.
So the next step is that the council has to do our own legislative finding and the verification. Verification. Spelled it wrong, so then I said it wrong. Process, and I know one of the things Michelle mentioned is a public hearing, which I do think public hearings are useful, but I would like to propose something different that would actually get a little bit more meat to the bone, says the vegan. Excuse me. So I don't have a name for it, but I think that the best thing that we could do is bring in the property owners and actually ask them questions, some of the questions that we asked Bartek that he was unable to ask. And then also tenants. And perhaps we do it in one, perhaps we do it in two. So it would be public hearing-esque, but we would be able to actually ask specific questions to them, or maybe just provide questions ahead of time so that they would have to. You have a thought.
I don't want to interrupt
Hey,
you,
go ahead.
but just to be clear, there has to be a statutory public hearing.
Right, but I think this should happen before.
And
Right, it can happen before, right?
it can happen, yes,
Anytime.
there's the no fewer than 10 days requirement in statute, but for you guys, if you want to gather information, whether it's making a request and requesting, return of notarized material or something like that, you can absolutely do that in advance. I just want to make clear that you have
You
to
still
have a
have to
public
do it, yeah.
hearing.
But I don't want this to be what our standard public hearing is, because I like to keep that separate so everybody knows what the public hearing is, which is folks come in, sign up for 3 minutes, has to be on the issue. This will be a little bit more flexible so that there could be a little more give and take with the council. We all do have questions, and Bartek, he collected the data, but he can't answer some of these nuanced questions that we will have for the landowners and landlords, and the tenants.
And one more piece of information, that information session that Bartek had, we just haven't had time or resources to transcribe it yet. But hopefully, when my intern starts, we'll be able to actually create a transcript and share that with everyone on the council in case you don't want to go through the whole thing, but just haven't been able to do that.
I would prefer that we held the public hearing as we have, and because that is not just people coming and speaking, it's actually evidence that is being brought forward. And then after that, we can make determinations of what we want to do with that information. And that could be then bringing in landlords or bringing in tenants to ask for the questions. We will be able to ask, I've asked this already, if we can ask questions of people testifying during the public hearing. And I was told yes.
Who told you?
William Persa.
I'm sorry?
William?
Bill.
Oh, Bill. I was like, wait, Bill. Oh.
So. Yes,
I really like the idea that that you propose to have sort of two separate less formal discussions with each group. Because I think when you integrate renters and landlords, that you may not get at the truth for fear of repercussions. I think it would be protective of both parties. And I think it would encourage people to speak more freely. And then have, Because if you can speak with the tenant first, it will inform your questions for the landlord's.
Anyone else?
I don't see a need to separate that out. And I don't think there's any requirement that we stick to a public comment of 3 minutes. We have a 5-minute public comment.
And see, well, wait, it's not, actually, that's not governed by your rules. That's for the public speaking portion of council meetings. The statutory public hearing doesn't have that requirement.
So people can speak for as long as we say they can speak for. And I mean, I don't see, I understand that perspective, but this meeting would still need to be public, so they would still be able to watch their tenant or their landlord on Zoom or on the recording. So there's nothing really that's private. And I mean, the Rent Guidelines Board has meetings, has public hearings that ask questions of people and go on for longer than 2 minutes. And there are tenants and landlords speaking at both those. There's not a separate hearing for either party. So I understand that desire, but I think in reality, that issue doesn't.
It just needs to
Materialize in
have
time.
it just needs to have one tenant as a result of his or her raising the issue of, say, warehousing. I haven't, as a tenant, I happen to know for sure that this particular landlord is warehousing. Well, we have then exposed that tenant, and I would prefer not to do that. I prefer to have those kinds of conversations, because that's kind of the information that we're looking for, anecdotally or your experience, provide proof. And I think that there's a way that we can make it safe for the tenant to do so. And then again, take that information, have it inform our questions to the landlords, because the landlords don't really have to attend. They don't have to do anything.
No, but we can't keep things private. We can't keep that information private. Has to be on the record, because this all could end up in litigation. Things that we make a decision on have to be public record. Right?
I think there's a fundamentally different between the two different types of data gathering we're talking about, between a public hearing and some more events where people, maybe not specifically invited, but certainly want to find people in various groups to have a kind of smaller, more directed kind of event. And I think that both of them are extremely important. So I would be in favor of having both types of events. And we may determine too, from one, that we need to have more of one or the other type. I don't see anything wrong with trying to do this and gain understanding in different types of venues. I think it's a very difficult issue, very broad issue. And the more we can do to bring people in from all perspectives, the better off we'll be in trying to make a decision in the end.
Okay. But in the end, we still have to have
Yes.
one large public hearing.
But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, so
Okay.
I think that's absolutely vital.
Okay.
I'm just in favor of 11,000 flowers, 4,000 data gathering events, or maybe not 1,000.
Sarah?
Yeah, I tend to think that seems like a good way to proceed with the tenants and then the landlords and then the public hearing. But again, how would this be? This wouldn't necessarily be a small group of tenants, because otherwise how would you determine which tenants speak and which don't, or would this go out generally
We
to
can
tenants?
invite people.
Well, we could invite people, yes, but any tenant,
Anybody can attend.
anybody could attend and speak if they wanted to.
And the thought for at least the landlord would be to send out, like Barbara said, a certified letter in the mail to everybody who responded, so that they could answer through sending us a letter back, the questions that we have that we would figure out, or come to the.
Or come to it. So what are the?
Yeah, so we'd still get all the answers to the questions. I don't know how that would work with tenants. I think it would just be upon us to gather as many people as we can. And the other thing that I liked about separating them and also not being a public hearing is that some people, not the people in this room, don't want to come to City Hall to speak. So hopefully this could be a little bit more relaxed to get people who aren't comfortable talking to their elected officials.
In this setting.
In this setting, a public hearing is, it's not intimidating to anybody here. I hope not. But I hope it's not intimidating to anybody, but it is. And so this is another way, and like Carol said, it may make people more comfortable. If it was separated, but I'm not completely sold. Like, I'm okay with, I get the point of having both too, and I understand it's all gonna be on the record anyway, but that was another reason for that suggestion.
Ask you a question about what you're thinking of, if you are considering sending written material to the sample group? Are you talking about also making that invitation, or, I'm sorry, but whatever the verb is, inviting tenants from the sample group? So that you have more of an apples to apples comparison?
I didn't think that through, but that would make sense.
Michael?
How would we stop somebody who's not part of that group from providing public comment? Public comment.
I'm talking about Andrea's
Oh. okay,
invitation
sure.
piece.
So that was aside from my question. You mentioned no fewer than, and then you talked about something else. Are we under some time constraint?
Oh,
For
yes,
the
so
public
for the
hearing, or-
public hearing, it's not, it's statutory, but it's tied to an emergency declaration, not tied to when the legislative fact-finding process opens. And I also just wanted to note that when we're talking about the record, it's not simply the record of the public hearing, but everything. This is conversation as part of the record, transcript from Bartek's, committee charrette will be part of the record. The recorded will be part.
So we're required to have one public hearing. Can we have more than one public hearing? So I think it would be, again, to use sort of the rent guidelines board as a sample. They have the hearing here, but they also have a Saturday hearing at the library that's usually better attended.
Yeah, the charrettes, thank you for supplying the word. It would be something that else, would give what I was saying. that people-
But the hearing can as well.
Yeah.
Or are we required to have a public hearing in City Hall?
We require.
You're not required to have a public hearing in City Hall. It might. We can talk about that.
There would be issues.
There would be issues.
It's a lot, it's more complicated. I have control here over the technology. And I wouldn't have control over the technology in other places. I mean, so it could be where we decide not to record it, but here, like, I am usually about 92% confident in everything. And I wouldn't be anyplace else. Doesn't mean it can't happen. I mean, we did have that one at George Washington, but there was a lot of work for us to get that up and running behind the scenes between Barbara, myself, and Kyle. And so there's a lot more control here. So I would think that we should at least have one, like, statutory public hearing here. Because if something goes wrong at whatever library, wherever it is, we're in trouble.
I have a question for Bartek. The last Rent Guideline Board hearings, they were both recorded and live streamed. And where were they taking place?
So there was one in Chambers, and then the other one was in the library, which does not have great technology.
Okay.
It was recorded, but recorded by someone's laptop. Yeah,
Okay.
so it just needs to be
Okay.
considered.
Okay, thank you. I definitely am in favor of one of those, the public hearing, like, at least if we have one, at least be on a Saturday. so that we have time. I expect that a lot of people will turn out. I mean, look how many people are here just tonight for a committee meeting, so we need to give people ample opportunity. And for us to have that opportunity to hear them, so. So cramming everything in on a weeknight.
Good with that.
Okay. So we're,
Two.
No, I think we're.
So we're talking two preliminary meetings and then the public,
The
two
statutory.
public, then two statutory.
Well, one is only statutory.
Sorry, what is
Do that one here, maybe Tuesday evening, and then on the following Saturday, do it someplace else. And I would feel a little bit more comfortable if it wasn't statutory, because there's something going on. You know what I mean? Like it's,
Yeah, so we're looking at four opportunities for the public to speak, one of which will be tenants, one of which will be landlords, and then two opportunities for the public to come in, one of which is statutory. I'm just trying to clarify it. So
and
that
it might
everyone's
be
aware.
helpful to have the committee meeting in between, so that when we get the answers from the landlords and tenants, we're able to talk to them, and we can come together and talk, and then at the public hearing, it'll be even more helpful. We've already had a conversation.
so you're saying two groups,
Usually
Then-
that's committee meeting, and if needed, we could do a special committee meeting. If the timing doesn't work out, and then two public hearings, one on an evening. Then that will be the statutory hearing, excuse me, and then one on this Saturday is probably most comfortable.
okay,
And if everybody wants me to try to find a different place in City Hall, I can attempt that, but no promises, because again, you should still have it recorded because people are gonna wanna listen. I don't know how many people, if you track YouTube, I don't know how many people watch us at this point, but when I was tracking it, it was a lot.
Yeah.
So you want, we want to be able to have people YouTube us.
Michael?
So I have more, I was not part of the zoning charrettes or anything like that, so I'm a little unfamiliar. The idea of having through the experience, I've attended just about every rent guidelines board public hearing where information from one side is presented and then shown to be false by the next speaker through evidence. If we're only inviting one group, how are we not just saying that something is, that the sky is red, frankly?
I'm not
Depends on the
sure.
quality of your questions.
Following.
It just seems strange to have one class be for one, and then again, if we're only really inviting the tenants who were surveyed, does that mean that we prohibit the groups working to unionize those tenants? Or like, do you have to be a tenant at that
I mean,
building?
so-
I just don't understand,
We
like,
worked out all the
because it's still a public meeting, so anybody
Yeah.
can come.
Yes. So yes, I mean, like this is just a broad idea. So we could iron out the kinks, and if you would like to partner with coming up with a plan, I'd be happy to do that with you. And then bring it back, or anybody who would want to. But I don't know, I guess it's kind of my day job started on Monday, so it's like you read one brief and then you're like, oh yeah, I totally agree with that. And then you read the other brief and you're like, oh, I totally agree with that, when it's the opposite side, but then it's your work to kind of figure out where the truth is. And that's the whole process. And that's why I kind of wanted it to be, well, because you're right. I mean, everybody's gonna, we might get the sky is red from one or more people, but that's gonna be our job to parse that out based on the two groups and any other work that we decide to do and the hearing and any questions that arise from that like, I just think it's gonna be definitely my process.
Okay.
But I'm happy, if anybody, like, I don't need, like, this was an idea that I think would work, but I do not need to be the person that
Well, as chair of laws and rules, I'm happy to
Oh.
work on
Yep.
that, arrange that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so, just to clarify, Bartek, you will send us tomorrow some PDFs and whatever notes or recording you have from that information meeting with the landlords. Thank you.
This will just remain and I think
Okay.
we're not doing anything, right?
No,
So we'll continue to discuss this at the next.
Yeah, Michelle and I will talk
As I said.
and figure out, yeah.
We don't need to vote to start the public hearing tonight?
no, we're not setting the public
Okay.
hearing. All right. All right, that concludes this portion, item number 1 on the agenda for this evening. So we will be going on to zoning changes regarding parking of trucks.
Can we
Yes,
actually do old business number 1 just because we have a guest?
sure. So I just wanted to let most of our guests know that you may not be as interested in the rest of the agenda, but you're more than welcome to check.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's civility during the presentation. Thank you.
Speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so do we all agree to return to item number 1 under old business? To move that up
That's
on the agenda? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was sarcastic.
It really was.
This actually is
This is someone.
Right.
Yeah. So some of the members were not here last month when you came, so if you would like to address the community. Do you want, yeah, please feel free.
Good evening. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, you can.
You can stand too, but.
I appreciate
For the sake of being brief, I wrote everything down because it's a little bit convoluted. Good evening, members of the council. My name is Melissa Wheeler. Together with my husband Anthony, we own 49 Park Street. We ended up purchasing the property in 2022 for $36,000. It was with the hope of creating our own affordable housing in the city, but we quickly realized the construction we could afford, modular, was pretty difficult to navigate throughout the city. So put our project out of reach. We ended up buying a house in the town of Ulster and realized we would not be able to develop Park Street. We're here tonight to ask the council to release Park Street from some outdated restrictions that were left over from the dissolved city program so that it can be sold and developed consistent with the zone. Because affordable housing is something that's near and dear to us. Prior to approaching the private market, in March of this year, I approached 3 local nonprofit housing initiatives in an effort to develop the property with them. Interest, but various reasons that it didn't work out. So we did end up bringing the property to market in May. We had really solid interest in the property. A dozen offers, 6 series buyers, all of which turned away the minute they saw the restrictions on it. Since the last meeting in July, where the issues came up for more info, we actually had another buyer approach us, a neighboring property, and they also backed out, so now we're at the 7. So at this point, we do feel that the lingering terms create a material deficit. And worth mentioning that these restrictions weren't placed on the property from the city to us. A gentleman by the name of Timothy Charis purchased the property from the city back in 2010. We purchased it at market value in 2022. And when we purchased it, we were made aware of the restrictions and thought we were all resolved. But it actually turned out that only 2 of the restrictions were removed, which is the council approval to sell and the city's right of reverter. And we're certainly grateful for that. But I think the others remaining and the amount of interest we've had in the property does show that the remaining ones do conflict with the T3N zoning. And we really appreciate your assistance for this. What does it say?
So this is on the restrictions, if you're interested, on page 15 of the packet online.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, what are the specific restrictions that you would like to see removed?
So the first one directly conflicts with the zoning. It is that it cannot be more than a 2-family building. It ended up being rezoned to T3N. I mean, that's an incredibly vast use for properties in the city. So a lot of people coming with a lot of great ideas that have fall within that zoning. That when we put that cap of it can only be a 2-family, that took a lot of wind. That's probably 50% of our people that pulled. The other one is permits pulled within a month or a year. The permit timeline has been difficult because the property is not flat. There are people who want to do topographical surveys and, be able to potentially capitalize on the dual road frontage, which encompasses going up to the bank. So that kind of planning takes additional time. So
Yeah, it's 2 months.
Right.
I apologize, that was not checked. And then completion of the construction project within a year. I'm not any sort of development expert, but I think there are very few even just plain residential homes getting finished in that timeline right now, so. Those really are the ones that are the shining stars that people get, turned away by.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
But some of these seem fair and you wouldn't have a problem with, right? Mainly like the premises in all buildings thereon must be rehabilitated to comply with existing building, fire and zoning codes. After consultation with the building safety division of the city of Kingston. I mean, that makes sense to have. So you're not asking to remove all of these.
Correct. I guess the reason that one rings a little bit weird is there's nothing there to rehab. It's a vacant lot. So how is somebody supposed to bring it into compliance? I mean, if it were to read maybe more standard, of, you know, that it must comply with building and zoning requirements, I think that would make a bit more sense. But I don't want to nitpick.
So I feel like we need to go into attorney-client, but just ask some questions. Or
Yeah. You want, or should I just, or,
of course I can say, because it has to do with zoning, so.
okay.
You're even doing
Start
that.
getting dark again.
Oh.
So sad.
What's so
I
sad?
like when it gets dark at like 9:30.
I do too.
Right?
I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Take a couple minutes here.
Okay, so just so you know, we are going to be right order this evening, I was writing what we have to actually vote on, so. Thank you.
Everybody refer to this as the.
What because it's literally.
For the deed between Steve Hingston and this person.
Yes, but I think it's more important to say the property, not the person.
Puppet.
Why don't you give it a?
Hmm?
When did you get it?
Last night at 10:30. Yes. It's so well learning is good. So. Right.
This knows.
Alright, so, a resolution of the Common Council to remove all restrictions from the deed between the city of Kingston and 49 Park Street.
Move that we adopt that legislation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously.
It still needs to go through the common council. Oh, that's the other shit. Oh, Wednesday. September 4th, which is actually not our normal meeting time, so it's a Thursday, but it should be on the City of Kingston website. Thursday, September 4th. Yeah.
So much.
All right, going on to item number 2, zoning changes, parking of trucks, our tech. You can,
For something completely different.
Right.
Elisa, I'm sorry, could you give me sharing privileges again?
Yes, let me see here. There you go.
Okay, so when when the common council passed the new zoning code in 2023, there were a host of references to the old zoning code throughout kind of various chapters, and one of them is in chapter 376, which defines the parking of trucks. And it previously said that any trucks could not be parked in any area zone in any residential area, which it defined as RRR, RR, R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, or R6. And so these proposed edits would now reference the new zoning transits. So that is the intent with these edits that were submitted here. However, I did want to also note the way that truck parking is currently regulated in the city is a little bit convoluted. And so while I do think that these edits should be passed, in my communication, I also brought up chapter 390, which regulates trucks not by weight, but by length. And so there's two different ways of regulating the parking of trucks. So the council should consider looking at chapter 390, while also making sure that chapter 376 redefines a residential area, so it's in line with our new zoning code.
So in other words, you're proposing that we make this change, which seems easy enough. And then if you look further down where you're talking about the trucks, are you suggesting that we consider what the definition of truck is here,
Or consider how to,
or how to reconcile the two different definitions? Yes.
Definition of refrigerator.
yes, and there's one more edit here, thank you for bringing that up, I forgot.
Oh, right.
Which is that refrigerator trucks or trailers cannot be parked overnight. And this was a request by planning.
And with the refrigeration unit, meaning
That's right.
make it pump.
Yes,
Okay,
So they can park, but they just can't be in operation.
that's right. Well,
well, depends on
Provided
whether
that
their
they're-
length or the weight, whatever we determine. And did planning give you any suggestion as to which of these definitions of truck they prefer, the ones that are in your letter?
no,
It's the weight or the length?
yeah, no, I mean, it's part of it is, what can actually be enforced. And so
Oh,
I might say,
good.
I would say that length is easier to
Mhm.
enforce because you can measure it, whereas you cannot weigh a truck unless you
That's a
have a
good
special machine or you open the door and can look inside usually there's a sticker that says the weight,
Yeah,
but
that
that
seems a lot
requires
harder
access.
to enforce.
So, I mean, there might necessarily be a conflict between these two in all situations. I just wanted to cover that.
Yeah,
I think Michael Horton.
Thank you. My question was about the refrigeration. What is the impetus of this?
I believe there was a planning, had a specific, situation where a refrigerator truck was parked overnight. And, there was it generated a significant number of complaints.
Because of noise?
I would assume it's a noise.
Generator.
Yeah.
so, this ended up being a little more complicated than what I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be just like changing the RRRs to the transacts. So I personally would like to just have a little more time because we just got it within the 48 hours. Well, I know that's acceptable, but I've not been able to read through everything.
Okay, what,
But thank you for answering the questions, because now we know what to consider.
I do have one more question.
Sure.
Maybe you do or don't know the answer to this. I can't visualize what a 10,000-pound truck looks like. Is that a semi-trailer? Is that an Amazon? Is that a UPS van?
Yeah, you're really looking at the tractor trailers. And
Okay,
then also if you think of a large tow truck.
okay.
So these are truly the larger vehicles.
Thank you.
And so the weight is usually means the gross, it's a longer truck to have that weight. Unless you had something really heavy in a very small truck.
Like our bear can.
Right, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
okay, thank you.
So item number 3, another zoning change, sign standards. I don't have that information yet, so that is also going to be
So table
tabled.
these two, okay?
So then we're moving on to old business. We completed number 1, 49 Park Street. So the next is the burn ban. That was communication that President Schott sent in. And I forwarded to everyone, the last month we could not actually figure out what was on the books at the time for open burning. And, the fire chief sent information that I forwarded to everyone.
So I do have a question. What So the burn ban, how would the burn ban affect this particular code language? There a proposal for how this might be changed, if this is in fact what's in it?
So I submitted this on behalf of one of, well, I guess my, I would say Michelle's constituent, she's my constituent, Lorraine.
Yes.
But as you know, last month I wasn't here because I was about to take the call or exist. So, I didn't work out anything. I was hoping the committee would talk. I knew Lorraine was gonna come. I haven't even gone back yet to listen to that meeting, so I don't have like specific work done on this. Like I said, I presented this on Lorraine's behalf. And because with experience with Lorraine when she was on CAC, right, it was the committee sees, I know how much work she has put into all this effort.
I'm just trying to figure out what it is that we need to determine tonight, if anything.
Well, were there questions after the last Laws and Rules meeting?
I think one of the questions
That
had
were-
to do with, barbecue grills
Mhm.
and open fire outside, because I think what they were proposing, what the group was proposing was that all fire outdoors be prepared. So we had, some second thoughts about whether or not that included grills, that included, cooking
And
areas.
fire pits.
Fire
Fire
pits.
pits and pits, yes. Yeah.
Good. I guess my question, Michelle, you sent this, which directs us to the DEC.
Yeah, these are the state law that
Right.
the fire chief follows along with our code.
And so the DEC specifically, well, it does not discourage the use of fire pits and grilling
Right.
and cooking outdoors. And so we could use that, I guess you send that to give us some sort of direction as to how.
Well, we didn't know how our own city, what laws were on the books at the time. So there's, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up now. The section 135, prohibition, thank you, of dense smoke and exceptions.
Right.
So I believe that there was
And understand. Only open fire. But that's just a definition, I guess that's why I understand what this was getting at.
there was like some kind of, chief said that there is a location. Oh, I don't know.
Or it does already say production or emission of dense smoke in the city is prohibited. But then later it talks about the time period. So if you're starting a fire, grace period when the fire's being lit. So it's, a period of grace.
Yeah, but there was
But, wait, but then,
What there is for emission of injurious quantities of certain materials, the emission of from any staff
from any stat, which
within the city into the open air of such quantities of what is that? Cinders, fly ash, not.
all right, so
As
yeah.
opposed to injury.
So basically what the DEC information is, he is saying, the chief is saying that we already observed a burn ban in the city of Kingston between May 15th and March 15th to the May 5th. And I think that Ms. Farina is looking for a more comprehensive version.
I'm sorry,
You're looking for a more comprehensive burn ban.
during times of high fire danger. And there was this information I submitted to you all. I hope that you all got to see answer to some of those questions that came up.
I had forwarded that. It was like a list of different, a compendium of different towns.
I can send it if you like. Okay. And tried to answer some of the questions that came up at last month's meeting.
So is this something that the CAC has looked at all?
The CAC,
Yeah,
lost my knowledge.
okay.
You mean in terms of high fire danger?
Yeah, or having some legislation created around this in the city.
No.
Okay.
This was based on the other municipalities' actions around us in Ulster County and how all of them had put in a burn ban, but the city of Kingston did not during those times of wildfires in November.
I guess I have a question that maybe it's for Barbara too, like, does the city, if there were, wildfires, like there were with the Canadian wildfires there, and the city said, oh, we really should have a burn ban happening now, and if do that without, have the mayor or somebody declare that there should be a burn ban without our having to put it in the code? Oh, okay,
But that doesn't mean that he
well, he
will.
would. That's
Right. So this is us saying we would want this. So yes, he could, but if
So that would be a separate clause that we could put in that would say, if a certain state were reached, that there were dangerous wildfires, et cetera, the mayor should be, compelled to create a burn ban or something like that.
You can't.
you can't,
Oh, well, there we go. So what can we actually do?
but we can create our own burn ban. We don't have to have him.
You can pass legislation. Or you could, the legislation could be to ask the mayor even to take some emergency action. Or you can revise the code in the way that you're talking about here, but you can't compel the mayor to do that.
Michael?
So I am concerned about this. I think the issue of fire safety is legitimate. But I also think if there was concern that the chief would say that. And I think that a lot of this is being, a lot of this information also refers to air quality rather than fire safety. And I think us sort of enforcing an AQI threshold will be enforced selectively. And or simply be scofflaw. And we saw over the last, since the last meeting, we've had terrible AQI days outside of our control. So we can have these standards that really just make people's lives here in Kingston. It's more invasive. I think it's overly prescriptive. So we could do all this stuff, and then still at the end of the day, there's a wildfire 600 miles away that creates a worse AQI than people grilling and people having open fires ever would. So, I just think that, and a question of who would enforce that, is that the police department? Is that the fire department, who is now running an ambulance service 24/7? Is that the building department?
They there on the weekend?
Are they there on the weekends? When people would be grilling on Friday evening.
I could actually, and it is the fire department.
So it is the fire department. So in addition to
And
now
they do work weekends.
creating, but we've essentially added an entire division of work onto the fire department in the last year. So I think that this just will get selectively enforced in a way that I think just ends up becoming a scofflaw.
I would say like one, that we should have the chief come and speak to us regarding the actual safety component. And if he feels that there is something, and then I feel like we should also speak with someone that can speak to what Michael is speaking on about, the air quality issues. I don't think that any of us are air quality experts, so.
Yeah. Now that makes sense to me.
I think too that, I mean, there's a midway flexible issue. So like even one of the articles here, the one from Massachusetts, it's about state officials recognizing particularly dangerous period and then banning. It's not a permanent ban. And so as long as we're confident that our public officials are going to be aware and ready to do something similar, I would be with Michael.
I believe that we have that in the state, particular, I mean, a set time is.
Well, they're responding to conditions, what I'm
Right.
saying, rather
Yeah.
than period of the year.
That was the point of this, is during period of high fire danger. The Pennsylvania Air Quality Coalition is asking for a ban in the same way that there were bans in other Ulster County communities during those times of high fire risk. And I'm hopeful that you'll all be able to read the document that's because it's answering a lot of these things, I think.
So when did you send the document?
I sent it to Michelle, so I think she shared it with
Michelle.
And it just
Okay, great, thank you.
Can we just make sure that we take a look at all this information before the next committee meeting? And Michelle, would you be willing to invite chief? And then I don't know if you have, but I think it's a great idea, because that might, not that I don't have concerns with the public safety, but my thought is the air quality, because, you know, I don't know, I'm very health conscious, and it's people really suffer on those days when we have the wildfire effects and can't leave their houses. So yes, I mean, barbecue grills may not be adding too much, but it does add something. But I don't know exactly much, so I would like to learn more. I don't know who that would be, though, to find out.
Okay.
That I don't. Can you take that on it?
Yeah.
And the fire chief may know.
Yeah,
Yeah, or maybe the group might know.
The Hudson Valley Air Quality
yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Did you say, what was the question? They might know? I didn't hear that part. I'm just talking about, more expertise on air quality and whether, you know, things that seem small, like barbecue grills or fire pits. How much that would add to negative air quality when there's also a wildfire issue going on.
I think I'm thinking like more like, also like a scientific person, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody has a
Yeah,
one
yeah,
option here.
all right. All right, so we will table this for everyone. Will read this information. I will invite the chief and we'll find an air quality expert that can speak on this. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Well.
All right, moving on to the charter review commission. So again, this is something that was introduced last year by Alderman Scott Childress. There's been background legwork going on. And
Like yoga.
yeah,
Like work, arm work, lots of.
yeah, a lot of research time has been put in by Alderwoman Prosty to bring us to this point now, where we have a resolution before us, so which would be actually a local law that must be passed by the city to undertake this step. And just remind everyone that the 2-year window is not something that we are choosing to do. It is something that is required by state law. So has everyone had a chance to look the resolution over, the legislation? So again, we went through various local laws that Alderman Pasty found for us through Nikon, yes, Nikon, or Department of State.
That came through Nikon.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And we had discussed which ones we felt that resonated with us, that covered what we were looking for. And so Alderman Randy Scott Childress created the one that we have before us.
And this is based on the will of the city of Albany.
Yeah.
And we're still good with the timing, right? Passes in September, or read first reading in September, second reading in October. I don't want to call any special meetings.
Not yet.
All right. So do you want to walk us through this, Randy?
So the first part.
As you're, I know you're over sleepwalk us through this. I'm sorry.
Sleepwalkers.
Yeah, so the first part is about the intent, the reason for doing it. And we've discussed this, I think, basically the idea is that Nikon recommends that this be done periodically. Some of the legislation we looked at talked about doing it every 10 years. It's been well over 20 years since we reviewed. And the idea is to review to make sure that the current organization of our city government, as determined by the charter, is still speaking to the needs of the city in the changed conditions of the last quarter century. It could be that the review commission decides that the current form of government is perfectly fine, no changes need to be made. It could make more. It could make some minor tweaks. It could also make some more robust recommendations. It would be up to the commission in the end to do that. So then the possibilities here, probably where we'll have most of the discussion, is about the establishment, membership qualifications and term of office. And so this is governed to a large extent by the state's municipal home rule law, part 2, and the commission shall be comprised of 18 members. That's the number that we can discuss, and that's totally up to us. Any of these numbers can be changed. That's what we're discussing. So this original here just says 3 members shall be named by the mayor, 3 members shall be named by the common council. There is a bit about what the council, with the process the council will follow, with a supermajority voting for each of the 3 successful members. And then to ensure that the CRC represents the wide diversity of the city and to create a democratically inclusive body. 12 members will be chosen through a sortition process. We've talked about the possibilities there. This would, of course, require hiring of some sort of consultant in order to ensure that that follows standard operating procedures. Next is the appointment of the commission members is intended to be nonpartisan. We want to make sure that we have a good, wide representation here. So that's what this 4th paragraph is about. C notes that the terms of office will expire on the day of an impossible vote. If there are changes, there are any amendments to be made, these will have to be voted on by November 3, 2027. And so that would also be the official end date of the commission of those appointments. So whether they make any proposals for changes or not, that's the last also. The next section, which is some of the area, commission powers and duties. This lays out the various things the committee is supposed to do. It also lays out the timeline for when they should get various things done. So it also providing for robust public participation in the process so that we don't end up in a situation where the commission, in a sense, surprises everyone with what they've got. Yeah, and so this is basically laying out the procedures for the commission to follow. The last one section, the charter commission hereby created, is subject to these various provisions. And this is where we're talking about robust public hearings, making sure too that they provide a preliminary draft in early January of 2027, so that the work that the vast bulk of the work they need to be finished and would be done or working on would be in 2026. They would still, of course, be able to make changes, add more material, or even revise the proposal after that January 3 date. But the idea is that we're giving them a very clear target for when they would need to have the bulk of the work done. We also want to clarify that there's a working relationship between the council and members of the commission, particularly in terms of any budgetary requirements. They would not be given free rein. This would be up to the council to decide what monies can and should be spent in order to support the commission. Yes, I think that covers it.
I think so. In general, yes, I think you've covered it.
So does anyone have like questions pertaining to the item? What?
The consultant who would figure out the 12 members, has there been any research to figure out the cost?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yeah, so I did some research and it really just depends on what
And I apologize, I clearly missed it, so I apologize.
It sort of depends on what you're asking a consultant to do. You know, if it's a small amount of work, you know, there's a range. The group that I talked to is called the National Civic League, and they do a lot of charter missions around the country. The costs range from, say, 53 to 92,000. If they come and they run the whole thing and run the meetings and everything else. If we were doing it, they submitted, I wrote to them and said, what's an example of what you might suggest? And they offered 2 tiers, one of which would be 28,000 and the other 43,000, whether you're including attorneys or not. So it's really based on what we would determine that we would want a consultant to do. And so they actually did submit a sort of overview of what a proposal from them would look like, though I did speak with John Toohey, and we would have to issue an RFP. But this gives us some idea of the cost.
Yeah, I knew about like the consultant, so that is the same person who would do the picking the 12. So say that consult.
Well, if not a person, a process. What they
Okay.
would suggest is a process, and then.
But it would be that consultant.
It could be, yes, it would be that consultant.
Okay, I thought it was something else other than the other stuff that would be part of that.
That would be part of their tax.
So we would really need to know if we want, what we would want that to look like fairly quickly in the process, so that we could, if they're going to be picking the 12.
That's why it's in the legislation.
That's right. Because the goal, I think you missed that meeting, was to try to have a group and panel by the end of the year so they could start in January.
Right, I knew that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we would have to get the consultants before, if they're gonna be the ones that set the process of picking out those 12.
Right, unless we were to shorten the timeline for the process and, it's in 2025
Which is a
budget,
little bit of a tight,
which is
I
tight.
don't see how that's feasible.
Could we reduce the number of people chosen by sortition so there's a quorum of members at least before
I like that.
this? Increase the number of our appointments and the mayor's appointments. Keep it 18, but balance out whatever that is. Add 2 or add 3 to each of us. You have 5 and 5, so there's a quorum.
Because my concern using that, like going through an RPF process of getting a consultant, we wouldn't want to do that until after the local law is passed, which would be October. But then, of course, the mayor needs to have his public hearing, so we're thinking mid-October, so we can't even issue that for a while, and then to have the consultant come in and come up with this process and still have the commission start in January. That's part that I don't see as feasible, but that could be a solution. Does that make sense now?
I understand what you're saying about the timeline, but I don't understand how that plays into what you're saying.
So right now, R6 out of 18 is less than half. So they would not be able, sorry, that was,
It's late.
so there's not a quorum. But if we were to have 10 of the members already chosen,
They could potentially meet in January.
they could meet in January.
The problem that I see
You have
with
to have
that,
it laid
though,
out in the law.
there's a problem with that though, because then if new people are coming in and half the group has already started, like the whole group should be doing this together to get the same information.
And the law basically says we have to have that established, like that has to go against the local law, like
What else? Be more specific.
how the group will, how many members and how it will be established.
Well, that would be, we're just saying that they consider, because I don't see how the consultant is gonna have this information to us in time to start January.
Like they are, by the time, like it's 30 days for the RFP, right? So from that timeline is mid Thanksgiving. And so that leaves 1 month for us to both choose the consultant and for them to operate this lottery. As
And a
well,
mailing.
do the mailing, solicit enough people to respond, like
Get people to respond.
Get people to
Time to
respond.
respond.
make sure they have all of their appropriate resumes or whatever filed for whatever needs to be attached to their profile for this lottery. And then chosen.
I mean, I like the idea of it, I don't think.
But I don't think it's practical because then you've got a group of people who need to come up to speed who missed the whole beginning.
You know, I get that, but I'm just saying, I don't think that we could start the group in January 1. If we're going to use that process, it would be really tight. And plus, I think we want to give, we talked about in meetings how we want to give folks, we don't want to say you have to send in your application in 4 days. Like, we want to give our constituents the time to respond.
Mhm.
And so we go along with this, I just think realistically, it's going to push the start of the committee back.
And they would be responding between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
I don't see a problem with moving the date for the start of the committee, because we could easily move that to the beginning of February and move the report date to February of 2027. I don't see that as a huge
That's
issue.
fine.
I think
I
that's
do
fine.
think we're always going to run into this problem because state law requires it to be done within a 2-year period. So, we're always going to be facing this issue of, how to squeeze the beginning period.
Yeah, I just don't think it would be feasible to have it that quickly. That's all.
Sure.
Right,
Well,
but that's
these are
what-
target dates.
But yeah, February would be
February could.
fine.
I would also say that in terms of the time period, I was talking with the town of Decatur, Georgia, and they were saying that they were holding their charter review meetings every 3 weeks instead of once a month, so that they could speed up their process, because they also had a deadline that they were working towards too, according to their state law.
Right, and that
So-
would be up to them. I just wanted
That's
to
right.
put that out there that I just
Oh,
don't
yeah.
think it's.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's-
So Do we, okay, so we're asking people to commit to what, an 18-month period? To
Well,
do
it
this?
would be a little bit less than 2 years.
A little bit, okay. So what happens if someone drops out? Do we have like substitutes that would fill
You
in?
were just saying what I was going to say is that we need to have alternates.
Alternates.
So in addition to the 12 members, maybe 2 alternates.
Right. And we had discussed some sort of stipend for childcare. I don't know if that this necessarily has to be in here, but
Yeah.
That's something where it's, yeah, okay.
No, and it does say in here that expenses of the commission members, the necessary expenses would be covered.
okay.
They don't get a stipend because they don't have to.
That's against state law.
Yeah.
Sarah, can you just clarify, because you just said 12 people, but Rennie
Oh,
said
18.
No, you put 12 members by partition. But
Oh,
within-
oh, yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Alright, so 2 of them are, okay. But I thought that was okay.
So additional 2 could be alternates, so that in the end you would have 12 people who would be weighing in. And 2 other people just,
So
I
the
don't
only
think
thing you do would be to have the council and the mayor each choose an alternate.
Ah,
oh, okay, so there could be an alternate, okay.
So you're still saying the 12 people, so it'd actually be 20 people, or you're saying?
Yeah, it would be 18 members
Plus
and 2
one.
alternates.
2 alternates.
Sorry.
And so the number of 12, so if somebody had to drop out, then you'd only have, 10 or 11, would you want to have alternates there also? I mean, that's why I was thinking the alternates would be.
If you're choosing the alternates there and they fill in, you're going to change the composition because the sortition folks are bringing a different community quality versus the appointed people, but it sounds like your alternates are going to be appointed, so then you would be
But-
stacking.
That's why I'm saying, could they be part of the alternates be part of the sortition process? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I would
I don't think, I don't know, whatever people prefer.
when you bring an alternate in, you're gonna change the dynamic no matter what, so.
So
But their appointment criteria is different. That's the issue.
I
We
see.
would be then changing the appointment structure of if
the mayor.
John Smith resigned and our alternate got appointed, that changes the entire composition of the board, which we can't do.
Right.
So we go for 14 people, then through sortition 2 would be alternates.
2 would be alternates. So it'd be 14 members, of which 2 should be alternates, et cetera. I also noticed, Rennie, going through this, there are several places where it says Charter Revision Commission that you probably want to change to Charter Review Commission in paragraphs B. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so anywhere that says revision, you want to change that to review.
And Sarah, I will answer this email probably this weekend.
Okay.
I've got my first deadline's tomorrow morning, so. Focused.
And I do have another question on page 2 in paragraph 4, where it says, no person shall be disqualified to serve as a member, employee, or consultant of the commission by reason of holding any other public office or employment, but it doesn't, it doesn't mention us, so we should not be part of this, right? So any other public, how do we refer
The line
to?
below that answers it.
Oh, does it?
Unless the sliders.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear that we would not be on, that commission.
Clarify that Sarah passed you.
Right.
So
And I have one last question. I'm waiting till Rennie Snell's ready. Oh, this is on the very last page where it talks about the commission can appoint and remove such employees and consultants as it shall require and fix their compensation. So is that something, I mean, they can't, the commission can't do,
Yeah.
that's paragraph D on page 4.
Yeah, it's like powerful.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we just don't need that sentence. Because the rest of that paragraph talks about how the mayor can direct boards and staff to participate in the process. And shall
But
not
it says the commission shall not use or expend any city funds.
not duly appropriated.
So
So why, that seems to be a contradiction though, in that paragraph. It says fix their compensation.
what I read it to be that they would make the recommendation of what the compensation should be, but then it would be up to the city, the mayor and council to approve or not.
But are we already hiring, after you put out an RFP, are we already making the hiring decision and fixing their compensation? By virtue of hiring them?
Yes, I think that's true. So, the thing that you want to avoid is the appearance that through manipulating the money that we would be manipulating the outcome.
But we're going through an RFP process. So presumably, if we pick good consultants, we're not manipulating that process.
Right.
They're running the
Okay, because I saw this as envisioning if in the process of doing their work, they decide to hire another consultant
I
for
see,
some
I
issue.
see. Okay,
But, we could either strike that paragraph altogether or clarify, like in the event.
yes, I think clarifying it would help, because yes, if the commission decides it needs additional,
Right, but
they could
the way,
propose that.
the way it reads is they could hire the consultant.
That's how it's sort of
read. Did you have one?
No, that was my point. The idea of them being able to remove their consultant or their attorney, I'm not comfortable with.
Okay.
Right, okay. So that's the end of my questions. But otherwise, thank you for adapting the already legislation to work for us.
Why? Oh my God, you're an hour into the meeting. No.
I signed them all. I found that spots and remember that I was signed or something, so I did.
Oh.
I got you.
These are all two.
Thanks.
Looking up my word. Unfortunately, I can't sign a free line of you.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah.
This is one. So you should. Do you mind?
Yes, but I'll do it anyway.
I use the ones.
Those are all my signature.
This is your signature?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
mine.
that's you?
Obviously.
Okay, right. Okay. So these are ones.
I can tell.
That doesn't count. It's you.
Well, I think he signed those. right?
Those are two with my signature.
Okay, this is you?
Yeah.
There was the question that I had in here too about. Let's see. It should be section 2. Paragraph A. This is the bottom of page 2.
Bottom of page 2, okay. I'm looking at paragraph A.
Yeah, it's in noted, I think.
Oh, so that's paragraph B.
Yeah.
If you
I'm sorry, B, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
The
The
commission may
commission may
submit.
submit amendments or alternative provisions to supersede designated portions of the charter or amendment if adopted. In such case, the charter commission shall prescribe the form of the questions to be submitted, which shall be such as to clearly indicate the effect of their approval. And I just wanted to make sure folks were cool with that process.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Because Andrea and I were just,
Oh, it's
You were
this.
gathering.
yeah, we're
Oh,
talking
the-
the language for the resolution. Not the weather. Sorry, go ahead.
It's in pink at the bottom of page 2. It's the last sentence.
Oh, yes.
The commission may submit amendments or alternative provisions to supersede designated portions of a proposed charter or amendment if adopted. In such case, the charter commission shall prescribe the form of the questions to be submitted, which shall be such as to clearly indicate the effect of their approval. So the alternative would be that it would be up to the common council to frame the questions as they go before the public. Frame,
For the propositions.
yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, they just,
Right.
that if there's one proposal, right? And they're saying all the changes are in this proposal, then you'd have that one question: shall the revised city charter proposed by shall the revised city charter proposed by the CRC be adopted, right?
Correct.
So the question is, if they suppose they have a number of provisions, and they want them separated out, or the common council believes they should be separated out, should the CRC be the ones to frame the questions that would go on the ballot, or the common council?
Or should they suggest questions that we could approve that would go on,
Yeah.
which is not, yeah, that would be an amendment to this. Yeah, because they may not want to change the whole charter, they may just want certain sections. They want-
Oh, my thought is the CRC, because they'll be in the
Oh, right, they're in the,
thick of it, so they
that's
might,
true.
I don't know, but I'm not sold either way. It's just kind of my gut reaction.
I would think it would have final approval after it's presented to us by the commission.
I can put it in that form.
Okay. I think Bob is on the screen. Is there something that Bob would like to say to us? No?
He's gonna.
No. No, I'm watching. I think it's interesting.
Thank you, Bob.
Yours.
This?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was from, Rickman Razor. 3-1. Okay. Yeah. It's. In the
Are you gonna retake that? And then, oh, I guess Michelle's ready for attach.
I didn't write it, just.
I
So
could
you could
do it
extend it
tomorrow, but
to Lisa and Janet.
Still put it as.
Yeah. And we'll just, Elisa, you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
So for the charter,
Can we make a copy of it? So we have a copy that goes with the report, and then we have a. Yeah, of what he's writing.
That's up to him. He looks like.
So that we
he might
can
need
have
his
it
notes.
with, yeah.
So, Elisa,
Yeah.
so Rennie's gonna send for the charter reform. Michelle's writing for attached. But Rennie's going to send it to you tomorrow. So it won't be her attached tonight, but if you could attach it when Rennie sends it to you.
Okay, and Rennie, can you just send that in Word so we can put it in our format?
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
if you want to.
Thank you.
Well, I was just thinking, make a copy of what he's just
That's
writing
okay.
up, so it's just attached, so that, clear.
I thought you meant you were taking that.
No, just if he makes a copy of that, so he can attach it, and then he'll send it in the written.
That's-
I don't
Whatever it
know
is.
if that copy would be useful.
Okay.
When I type it up, I can include a copy of this,
Great, thank you.
but there's other notes that I think are germane there. Not to mention some doodles. I want doodles to end up in our final legislation.
All right, is there any further questions? Okay, so I'm gonna read the committee report. A local law of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, to establish a charter review commission as per attached. May I have a motion? Second? Discussion?
Thanks for all the hard work.
You're welcome.
All right. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Any opposition? All right, this passes. Five, zero.
He's also. Yeah, they're all. I can't read that. Oh.
Bit of, bit of.
I could have put it over, but
I know.
I was not able to
Yeah.
reply. Like,
I'll figure that out.
There's 7 more issues to go. I mean, it's,
That's us.
Is that going around? Okay. I'm trying really hard to keep everything forward. So last on the agenda is legislative procedures, which we have had ongoing discussions regarding cataloging, everything from YouTube videos to getting all of our legislative documents going back to the 1800s, scanned and cataloged, digitized. And I think it's important regarding FOIL requests, I think that we need to have a conversation about.
Sure, and I wasn't here, it's also really late. So,
Yeah.
Continue this conversation, but as you know, let's go back to the digitizing. I wasn't here during the last discussion, but it sounds like the council's focus is more backwards looking on archive documents. As you know, there have been multiple leaks in the vault in my office. And so all of those one-of-a-kind resolutions are just, obviously Lisa, her team, they work to try to address those issues and emergencies when they arise, but it does leave those one-of-a-kind documents vulnerable. From a substantive perspective, my key concern is that you guys have no, nor do I know what the council has passed in the past. And so you can't cross-reference even for your charter, review commission, what may have been passed at any other time that's in a document that's only in paper form. And that has substantive ramifications for that work and also my work. So I don't know how much of that discussion you already had last time. One of my questions is about sort of the more contemporary documents. We have even now, all the resolutions that you all are going to discuss tonight, none of them are available in a searchable fashion. So, whether it's preparing for whatever, you're planning to consider, or in my case, trying to deal with, either some transactional issue that's come up to see what the council has decided before, or in a lawsuit, there's no way to do that. And so I don't know if that or was part of the discussion. Sort of shifting to the other category, how this relates to FOIL. I touched base with Elisa today, and it seems like while the number of FOILs for the year is probably still going to be around that 600 request number, the category seems to have changed somewhat. And, I don't deal with the FOIL issues frontline, but Elisa, if you're still there, did you have a couple of thoughts to share?
Yeah, so I agree that the number seems to be right around 600. That's the average of FOIL requests we've been getting since I've been the clerk. But the difference that we are seeing, particularly this year, is in the past, the FOIL requests seem to be simple documents. For example, a police report, an accident report, or a fire report. The FOILs we're getting now are rather voluminous. They are for any and all documents, and they list almost every department, and they're just enormous requests, one after another. I processed 2 requests today that involved 5 different departments, and it's a lot. So we definitely see a difference in the quantity of information that's being requested.
And so, again, that's kind of what I've heard from that, along with the separate issue that because our documents are not, digitally available, that also increases the burden, because you gotta find paper materials, for example. And just in terms of the personnel perspective, we don't have any one person who does FOIL. Every department has a designated FOIL records access officer, sorry. If that person is away on vacation or misses their email, and they miss that 5-day acknowledgement, or if for whatever reason some email gets forwarded, not responded to within the time frame that we see, an automatic FOIL appeal. And that is something that lands in my office, but really with Matt. And there have been a pretty significant number, I understand, I don't know the exact number, of items that have gone either straight to the appeal, constructive denial, appeal stage. And one of the issues, and some of it is, a training issue. I know that people are very concerned about what am I supposed to do? How do I respond to this? But the answer can't just be, well, let Matt handle it. Right. And on the other side, if you look at, and I'll just share, I think I've talked to somebody about it, or maybe been in one of my updates. When you look at at the state level legislation that at least in theory is meant to improve transparency, doesn't really contemplate a Finley resource municipality like ours, or like a lot of other surrounding ones. So this has not been signed by the governor, but when you think about it, it contemplates having people whose job it is to process FOILs. I was looking at something today, and I think, CUNY is hiring a FOIL officer. It's $100,000 a year job, FOIL only.
Mm.
But that's typical for New York City agent. I mean,
Oh, 600?
no,
I'd have a lot,
100.
only 100,000.
I think you could relocate.
Well, that's my next, that's just, you know, when you have somebody whose job it is to sort of manage that, then it gets done in a particular way. If what you're doing is having every person in the buildings department or every person in grants management or every person in, like Elisa just said, 5, gathering largely paper. And then, you know, vacations, missing things, whatever, then that just ends up being an issue that my office has to sort of address. And I know in the most recent case that was handled, actually wasn't even electronically filed, the Article 78, so all of that had to be handled outside of the normal electronic filing process. So it's late, and I know we all have a lot, but it's not simply that the digitization work is for just good government, which it is. It also is a drop in the bucket, but a necessary one to help us deal with what is an onslaught of very broad information requests.
Are there any examples of intra-municipal agreements to sort of pull together resources to do this together? So for instance, Newport's, it could be joining Newport's and have.
One FOIL officer for
Yes.
several municipalities.
Or would the county consider something like that?
But the thing is, if, like what you have here, City of Kingston, give us every document. Right. Is your idea that someone would come from New Paltz and go through like Ruth Ann's files and then, you know, Cahill's files, that I've never heard of that. There are companies that once you have digital documents, will help you pull material, but again, we're not at that. Well, it's not just that we have to be digitized, that's a huge part of it, but there's a human component of, there's human and then there's a sort of tech assist. We've got to think about the human component.
Right, because once the records are digitized, they have to be cataloged in such a way that they also can be filed, right?
Some made up documents.
It's always that.
I understand you want to have somebody who's familiar, becomes familiar with the departments and, you know, has access.
I think things are,
Knows where these documents are to digitize.
I mean, they're
Digitizes them.
things that are easy, sort of like Elisa was saying, if you have somebody requesting information for, you know, an event or a point in time, that's not particularly cumbersome. That's not, I think, what she was describing.
Michael, had a question?
So it will always be when a FOIL happens and it involves whatever department's documents, it will always be somebody in the department going through those relevant files. There would be that point person in the department.
I mean, it's difficult. So, right, if someone's asking for common council materials, say,
Yeah.
certain common council materials are on the website. Some are in the clerk's office, some are in my vault. I mean, they're just, it really depends on. So someone now has to route to different departments, and that's
So
what Lisa does.
I'm uncertain of what the solution we are seeking is, other than departments need to be digitizing their records to make it easier to search. I think it will always be rather arduous to answer these FOIL terrorism requests. But so what is the solution that the council
Well, right
should be
now,
appropriating?
right now, I mean, I'm not anticipating such a long meeting. I think we're gonna have just a more general discussion.
Okay.
I do, but given where we are right now, I think, ultimately, it should end up being a job. And we can go more into that in the coming months.
And the
But-
department heads wouldn't be, for instance, if it is the department head who's the point person from their department, which I think most of them are, then they wouldn't be the FOIL officer for their department. It would, that FOIL person who has that job would then collect all the material. Is that,
Again, you can go in more, like further in the budget time period into some more detail, but a human being needs to run interference. Whatever tech gets brought into the mix at some point, whether it's digitizing, we can't have all of our materials digitized even in the next 6 months, right? But a human being needs to be tasked with this because it is unsustainable in its current form.
But it will always, but even that person would still need to go to the person in the grants department and say, I need these materials, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, first of all, if we're kind of proceeding on parallel tracks for certain things, we have materials that we don't have a kind of firm records retention policy and document destruction policy that aligns with all state requirements. That's one. Two, we have to actually digitize our materials and make as many of them as possible publicly available, because then it's not a FOIL issue, that they'll be right searchable on our site. Three, as we are going through that process of trying to get to there, it would be someone's job to both run interference now with paper and assist with the digitization and document organizing and document sort of destruction or scanning or whatever we decide to do, but it should be a job. We have so much information and people in each department are trying their best to do their jobs. And on top of doing their jobs, they have to sort of run hither and yon searching for paper. And that, again, is not sustainable.
there are also, I was gonna say plenty of FOILs, but I don't know what the number is. Where, so say if I was foiled for emails, Kyle will just go for, for the search words in and. So you don't always need to have that point person.
You always do, because somebody has to look and say, for example, your foils, if we've been going through a contentious issue of litigation, for example, and talking about your affidavit that I'm preparing or something like that, someone has to go through and review that material for privileged material and FOIL exceptions.
Is that what the department heads now do, or is that Matt who's been doing that?
So
That's what I assume.
has provided multiple trainings and guidelines for records access officers in each department to at least make a first cut. And obviously, if there are finely tuned questions, you seek advice. But it hasn't actually worked out that way, so that it is simply there's a lot of burden for people asking questions on
But
the
that's-
document by
That's an operational issue though, it's the job of the executive to tell his department heads to comply with
to do their
proper
job.
record keeping.
To do-
That's not the council's job.
It seemed useful. It seemed useful for the council to understand what's
Yeah.
going on. So that's what I'm doing, is
Okay.
describing what's happening. I'm not necessarily asking you at this moment to solve the problem. I don't think there's a single solution, but in concert with the council's conversation ongoing about trying to bring legislation and other documents into the 21st century, this was an aspect of that issue that I'm discussing.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay, I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. It is 9:39. So can I get a motion?
Motion.
To close this open meeting?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.